It's the Ruben J Show, and excited to be chatting with this gent right here, Zack Heydorn from the PWTorch. He's the assistant editor there. He's got a new book out as well that we're going to talk about here in just a minute. Zack, how you doing this morning?
Man, I am doing fantastic. Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure. Follow your work and really enjoy it. So I'm honored to be on here. Thank you.
Let me tell you one thing that I love about what you do and what the Torch does is I think the Torch, and for those who are listening to this who don't know what the PW Torch is, because my audience is wide. It's a wrestling website that they cover the news. They do a lot of commentary and stuff, and we're going to be talking a lot of wrestling. So if you're bored, just listen to it for the ads. But I love that the Torch has is probably the most consistent organization out there when it comes to wrestling content.
Yeah.
You know what you're getting with everybody. You know it's going to be good, solid reporting, good, solid, commentary. And I feel like how long have you been an assistant editor there now? Like 3 years.
So for 3 years, I've been their assistant editor for 3 years. Yeah.
So I feel like, and this is no diss to Mr. Keller, who I have tremendous respect for. But I feel like once you got on board officially as assistant editor, that website has increased its value to wrestling fans. And so
Well,
my first question for you when it comes to the Torch is how did you get involved with the Torch? Like how did that happen? Because I know you were doing stuff for them kind of, pro bono for a while, and then all of a sudden you were announced the new assistant editor. I'm like, okay, cool. How?
yeah, yeah. Well, first of all, thank you for the kind words. I appreciate that. And yeah, we do work hard collectively at the Torch to kind of maintain our consistent coverage and have our like tone on the brand, like with whatever we put out there. So I'm glad somebody noticed, at least one person. This is good. But yeah, so I started with the Torch, at the very beginning, like six years ago now, and it all started with a guest editorial that I wrote and submitted to Wade about Roman Reigns. And so I did that, and I had been working with some other websites and just kind of like doing some different writing, but really wanted to kind of work my way to somewhere that had like a bit of a mark on the industry and the business. And so the Torch was a great fit there. And so that guest editorial got me in the door. That got my foot in the door. And from there, I covered the first ever Mae Young Classic, which was a blast to do. And I just kept picking up different things along the way that Wade needed. So it started with the Mae Young Classic, and then it was okay. There's this new show, 205 Live. Can you pick up that up and cover that on a weekly basis? Okay, sure. Once I started doing that is when the door got opened to do some podcast work and do some of Wade shows, but also some of my own. And then with some of the other folks on the Torch team, I moved into covering Monday Night Raw from there. And then at that point, I was writing more editorials and covering Raw, and again picking up as much as I could. And it just kind of snowballed into this assistant editor role where now, managing the day to day, what's going up on the website, obviously with Wade's, kind of ear as well, of course, but managing our YouTube channel and managing the website and still doing a multitude of podcasts. So it really was just a total like snowball effect deal where you come in and then I just tried to gobble up everything that I could and do whatever I could to get experience. And from there it just kind of kept rolling. So it's really a story of like just truly getting your foot in the door and doing kind of what everybody says to do. Like get your foot in the door, don't say no to anything, and give yourself time to move up. And that's exactly what happened. And I got lucky and was thrilled to be able to take the role when Wade offered it.
It sounds like the amazing story of what happens at most media companies these days.
Yeah.
Somebody comes in as an intern and they just see opportunity and they just keep going for it. You have typically two types of people: those who see opportunity and take it, and those who complain about the fact they don't have any opportunities. You know,
Right.
and it looks like you took it and you ran with it, which has led to some great stuff, man.
Yeah, it has it, and it's it's like part of I think for me was I when I started writing about professional wrestling, it was for me. Like I liked to do that, and so obviously that made it easier to like take on these different job responsibilities, because I loved it so much. But that certainly helped. I mean, like I can't overstate like having the passion that I have for professional wrestling got me through some of those awful 205 live episodes. You know what I mean? Like, knowing that, like, okay, well, like, hey, there's worse things to do with your time than watch a Tricker street fight with Enzo Amore on 205 Live. So, I mean, that certainly helped, and there's a great team over there, and yeah, it's just yeah, I mean, like you said, if it's really a thing where foot in the door, and just don't say no. If you like it, run with it, and you'll land in a good spot.
Yeah, absolutely. I've, which is funny is I've actually tried a couple of times to try to break my foot in the door over there at the Torch, and not so much as a writer, but to try to edit, podcast for Wade or podcast for anybody, and Wade and I would exchange DMs every now and then he's so busy. It seemed like it was impossible to get anything on the books with him, which is cool. But then you started doing a lot of the stuff I think that I would have wanted to do. So I'm like, all right, cool. He's got his in place, and it's great, and I love it. I actually, full disclosure, I had unsubscribed from the Torch for the first time in like 8 years, like towards the end of 2021, just because I was paying just to listen to Todd Martin for the most part, and
Sure.
had gotten so far removed from the wrestling world that I just was like, I don't know if I can justify spending, $100 a year or whatever it is for the yearly membership. And then I started reading some of your stuff and listening to a couple of your podcasts as well. And I'm like, all right, I can, and I miss Todd, obviously, Todd and I, he lived out here in LA for a little bit, and so we have some of that in common. So anyway, all that to say, I think your work and what you brought to the table has re-earned my subscription after a brief hiatus. So for whatever that's worth,
Oh, that's worth a lot, man. I appreciate it a lot. I really do. And sometimes you sit and you're working and you're doing your thing and writing and podcasting, and like and you have moments where you're like, man, I hope this is resonating with somebody out there. And so it absolutely is wonderful to hear that, and I thank you.
So let me ask you this, because I run a website, I do my podcast, I do all that stuff too, and I'm not a great writer. I'm terrible at grammar. I don't have an editor, unfortunately. So a lot of times my girlfriend will go in and be like, "Hey, you missed a comma here. You missed all this, whatever." And I'm like, I just do it for fun. It's not for money at this point.
Yeah.
But every now and then something happens where I'm like, okay, this makes it worth spending the hundreds of dollars a year to host a podcast and host a website and all this stuff. And a couple years ago, my favorite artists started retweeting a lot of my articles I've written about them and started getting thousands of views. And I sat there and thought to myself, this is why I do this.
This is why, yeah, yeah.
This is why, and then people would message me and say, man, that was so, they would say it's well written. I'm like, are you sure? Did you graduate high school? But for you, have you had a podcast or an interview, or maybe the project we're about to talk about here in just a second? But maybe something more on the writing side or podcasting side that you just sat there and you're like, this is why. This is what makes it all worth it, makes it worth the long hours, and this is why I continue to push forward.
Yeah, there's two things that stick out in my head. The first one is not so much a um like this is why I do this type thing, but more so just like that's really it's really cool to have that. And so I started the VIP podcast on the canvas in 2018. And when it comes back after WrestleMania, it'll be 200 episodes.
Wow.
And it was so cool when I was looking through like the archive. It's like, man, you've got this snapshot of real time analysis on the art of what was going on in wrestling from 2018 to 2022. Like that's pretty cool to have that. Just for me, it's like, man, that's like a snapshot in time, and there's a lot of weird that went on in that time with like the pandemic and everything. So it felt good to kind of look back on all those shows, 200 episodes, and go, man, there's a lot there. And then and the other time where I was like, man, this is really why I do this. I've got two daughters too, and the when the speaking out movement happened in 2021 in wrestling, I wrote a column about that on PWTorch.com, just an editorial column, with my daughters in mind, where it's and so because that everything hits you more or differently, not more, but just differently when you have children. And in this instance, I've got my oldest daughter has started to watch wrestling here and there and likes certain things. Hook has the 4-year-old market cornered. My daughter is obsessed with that dude. But anyway, like, so hearing from other people after they read that, kind of going, man, like, yes, it spoke to me in that way, or it resonated with me, or I know what you mean, and that was just really moving because it was such a just such a kind of intense story. And normally I'll write about what's going on in the wrestling discourse, or this angle or that angle, or this match or that match or whatever. But this was different because it was like a real world serious thing. And to have people kind of come back at me and go, yeah, man, this helped me kind of walk through what the story is. That meant a lot too. And I was like, man, yeah, like this is important stuff. It's small, I don't know how many people actually read it, but for people that did, it was really nice to hear them and kind of just like reaffirmed, like, all right, we're doing some good stuff over there.
Yeah, it's those pieces, and that's I wish I'd written something that cool, or not. I shouldn't say the word cool. Something that important, because I think the one thing that I thought about during that speaking out moment, which for those who don't know, it's kind of the Me Too of wrestling,
Yep.
specifically for wrestling, where a bunch of female performers majority would come out and talk about some really bad shenanigans that happened in locker rooms of different promotions, and some of it was criminal, some of it was unethical, all of it just not good and not right. And to be able to have a piece that is going to be cemented in that time frame, as unfortunate of the situation as it is, it's still very again, I don't want to use the word cool. I don't know what other word to use. You're the editor here. Help me out. What's a better word than cool?
Well, yeah, I mean, yeah, cool. Yeah, that would be kind of, I don't know, underselling the kind of the meaning behind it. But to me, just I think what I hoped it was impactful, like an impactful piece of the time. Like this happened in wrestling. And so you cover it and you don't run from it. It happened, and yeah, there's a for me there's a piece out there that hopefully coincides with that time. There's good stuff out there, and then there's bad stuff, and that was not a good time.
Yeah, and I'm glad that. Oh, I'm hoping that a lot of that stuff has been cleaned up and people are being accountable for a lot of it. So, Stunning: The Wrestling Artistry of Steve Austin. It's a new book by Zack Heydorn, and I don't know. I don't see the other. So did you do? So let's. What's the other gentleman's name or other person's name?
So Thor Jensen did the artwork. Yeah.
Great. So this is an interesting concept. I think. So let me ask you this: Why a book about Steve Austin? I feel like so much has been written about him already. Why a book about him to start out?
Boy, it is quite a journey. So here's the book. I've always been from the once I got past like, oh, I love Hulk Hogan as a kid or whatever, I really come to just want to digest like the art of the business. That's why podcast that I do is on the art of wrestling. I wrote a column on that for a little while on PWTorch.com before kind of switching that concept over to the podcast. It's just something that I'm interested in. Like it's just fascinating to me, you can put thousands and thousands of people in a building, two people in a ring with nothing else, and bam, they're getting reactions. They're getting reactions. I loved just exploring that in various forms, and so much so that I wanted to write a book about it. And when Hybrid Shoot, who's the publisher on this, Jonathan Snowden, kind of when we were talking about the project, it started there. It started as, okay, let's write this book about the art of wrestling. And man, I'm so glad that we that we didn't do that, because it probably could have been 30,000 pages. Like, there's so much to it. It can be so many things. There's everything from, what's going to happen at Bloodsport this weekend in Los Angeles to Johnny Knoxville versus Sami Zayn at WrestleMania last year, and everything in between. There's just so, like, the art of wrestling is so open and so vast. And so Jonathan, was like, hey, this concept is very interesting, but let's drill it down to like one specific subject. Let's just focus the concept a little bit, or actually a lot, like more pinpoint, a lot more laser focused. And that's when we came up with the idea of like, okay, well, let's take a star and focus on the art of that person's career, start to finish. So that's how we got it to that point. And then it was just who do we start with? And I agree. Like there's like Austin's story from a career perspective. He started here and then he went here and then he did ECW and he was fired from WCW, and like that's been told 4 times, 5 times, 6 times over. We know that. But what I didn't think was told, on like one of the most influential and top draws that the wrestling business has ever seen, is the art of his career, the other side, the day-to-day, match-to-match minutia and analysis of what did he do in the ring? How did he work? How did he talk? How did he walk that, commanded that attention in the end and yielded him becoming the biggest star in the business? And that's what I wanted to explore with him. And I didn't think that story was out there, and that's what we did. So that's how we got to Steve Austin. It just was like, okay, he's the biggest star, and like, hey, there was a business side of it too. Everybody knows Steve Austin. Hopefully that opens a lot of doors and people are interested to pick it up because they've seen him work. But the other thing is he had so many different eras of his career. When you think back, 1990 with the USWA, and then Stunning Steve, and then the Hollywood Blondes, and then he's got his, ECW run, and then it's the Ringmaster, and then it's, Stone Cold as a heel. Like, there's all these different eras. And so it just fit well into kind of the outline that I wanted for the project. So once we kind of nailed that down, it was like, all right, we're going with Steve and off to the races.
It's such an interesting idea because I agree. Now that I'm thinking about it, Steve Austin has probably, for somebody who hasn't up until last year hadn't wrestled. I don't know if we want to call what he did last year wrestling, but it was entertaining for sure.
Sure.
I can only think of 3 people who can be away from the business for such a long time, and the opening note of their entrance music gets people excited. And that's Austin, The Rock, and Hogan.
Yep.
Shawn Michaels probably still has a little bit of that, but I think people aren't clamoring for another Shawn Michaels match the way
right
for Steve Austin, the way they are for Dwayne. And if Hogan was in good shape, I think people would want to see one last good Hogan match. Thank God we probably will never see that because I don't think.
Yes, that's probably a good thing that we don't see that.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So it's an interesting idea. And I wonder, do you dive into the idea of like how Steve Austin, who realistically speaking, he wasn't the most jacked physically person in the ring. He wasn't the most exciting wrestler. He didn't do exciting moves in the ring. He was a great talker, obviously, but how he was able to stay on top for so long, even when he wasn't wrestling.
Yeah.
And I guarantee you, if you announce that Steve Austin's going to be on Monday Night Raw, you know, on a random Monday in December, it's going to pop a rating. Do you explore that in this book?
Yeah, very much so, very much so. So the book is organized in a way where so as I mentioned, we kind of break down the eras. Those are like the quote unquote chapters of the book. And then in each one, there's okay, here's kind of what's going on in the wrestling space and how Steve fits into it. Then what I did is I pulled out anywhere between 3 to 6 matches from that era and essentially like transcribe them on paper with analysis all along the way. And so we talk about all of that, um, era to era to era to era to era. And we talk about the moves, yes. But as you mentioned, there's a lot going on with Steve Austin in between the moves. And what what we kind of what I kind of landed on by the time the book was done was that there is a constant attention that Steve Austin pays to the audience every single era of his career, even when he's like green as can be in 1990, having his first matches in the USWA. Like his crutch is not necessarily a move or a headlock or, oh, I'm just going to, chop you. He looks to the audience, even if it's just a glance or a glare or some kind of mannerism. But he regularly checked in with that audience to see where they were. Are they with him? Are they not? And when you look and when you kind of go through his matches and analyze them frame by frame, which is what we did in the book, you see how he reacted to whatever they were giving him. If what he was doing was working, you see him, okay, we're going all in on that. We're keeping going. Let's keep that submission on, or I'm going to keep working the ankle. If he kind of does his crowd interaction and he doesn't get the feedback he wants, you can see him pivot in the ring during the match to try to pull the reaction that he wants out. It's all over his career from the very, very beginning. It seems like it was like very natural for him to do that. And I think it still serves him well to this day. If you go back and watch the WrestleMania 38 match, I mean, all the time he's pausing to check in with that crowd always. And that is a common thread that is throughout his whole career. And I think, obviously he has a natural charisma. We talk about that in the book too. Like sometimes you just have this natural charisma that the audience just is drawn to, but he doubles down on that because he's regularly keeping them as the focus of what he does. And I think that combination builds a relationship and an investment in him as a character that is almost unmatched in wrestling.
So with this book, I'm excited to see how it comes out because it's, there's artwork involved, there's storytelling involved, there's, this legacy name of Steve Austin. Um, are you planning others?
Yeah, yes. I mean, I think I'm I'm planning others for sure. I enjoyed, man, I can't say I enjoyed the process of writing the book, of course, but really like the process of watching all his stuff, like all like the entire career of Steve Austin. I mean, there's so many guys you could do that with. Like I mean, to me, if I'm thinking about a wish list of okay, what could come next, Bret Hart is somebody that I think would be phenomenal to write this similar book about. And it would be totally different than Steve Austin's, but but just the art of Bret and the eras that his career had, it kind of follows like a similar path. He'd be great. Shawn Michaels would be great. Gosh, I mean, Ric Flair would be something that'd be quite the undertaking. But yeah, I hope that to do another one. I really do. And obviously we got to get this one out first. Pre-orders obviously are available now. We'll talk about that in a minute. But yeah, I mean, this is kind of my thing. So I hope to continue with more down the road, of course.
And what's your background? Like, what's your professional background pre Torch, pre all that? That um, it's gonna sound kind of harsh, but qualifies you to look at the artistry of of wrestling.
Well, hey, I don't know about that. I come from a family of writers, for one thing. So both my parents are editors, and so the writing element is in my blood, so to speak. Um, Professionally, though, I come from a communications background. So I was a radio DJ back in the day, and kind of cut my teeth there. So that doesn't really apply to like, hey, you're gonna like analyze this wrestling. But the way I look at it is like, it's art, man. I mean, somebody else could write this exact same book and pull out different things, or see different things, or have different things resonate with them. I mean, that's part of the fun of wrestling. So obviously this is my interpretation of his career, but I've watched a lot of wrestling. I've written a lot about wrestling, and so hopefully, people that resonates with people.
Absolutely. So again, the book is called "Stunning: The Wrestling Artistry of Steve Austin" by Zack Heydorn, and again, I forgot the other gentleman's name.
So yeah, I definitely want to talk. K. Thor Jensen was the artist in the book, and look, hopefully you guys all that out there want to pre-order a copy because you like the idea of the content, but the artistic value of this with the pictures and the graphics and the art is amazing. He did a wonderful job. He has really great like sketches of different parts of each match that we talk about, 2 to 3 for each one, and they're so unique and so cool. I'm super proud to have it in my book, and he did a wonderful job. So if you don't want to read about Steve Austin, you could look at pictures and you'll enjoy that too.
Awesome. I'm looking forward to this. I really am. Pre-orders right now for an ebook. Full price is $10, but on the pre-order it's $7. You're saving 30%, which is a great deal.
Yeah.
But to get both a print copy and an ebook copy, after the pre-sale's $20. But if you get it right now, it's $15, and that's a great deal, dude. It's a great
Yeah.
deal. You're underpricing this.
Well, hey, look, my main goal is to get it in people's hands, and the pre-sales have been really great so far, and we've got goals that are in our sights, and I just want to get it in people's hands. And so, if you guys out there are interested in Steve Austin, or interested in just seeing how I break down his matches and his career artistically in the ring, I think you're really going to enjoy this. I think it's going to be a page turner. You can pick up this book and watch the matches right along with it if you want to. There's so many ways I think you can digest it. And so, yeah, it's discounted right now. And you can check it out. There's an Indiegogo page that you can find on my Twitter account at PWTorch. I'll pass it to Jay too, and we can make sure that that gets out to you guys. But yeah, if you have the means, I certainly would appreciate it. You can support independent publishing, which is important these days too. So lots of good reasons to pick up a copy.
Yeah, absolutely. And what the easiest way to find a link, there'll be a link in the description of this episode, which I'm going to try to get it out today, just so that way people who listen to this have the full 19 days left to pre-order, it looks like, but at the latest it'll be 18 days left, because I got a busy day today. Take the day off so I can go to Disneyland and go to a concert, and only one of those things is happening, but I got a lot of other stuff.
There you go.
One last question, because this is coming out during WrestleMania season. This has nothing to do with the book, nothing to do with the torch. I need to know, are you a team Reigns or team Rhodes?
Team Rhodes. I think it's going to be Cody. I think Cody's going to take it. I think that's going to be the story of Sunday. I'm going to be out in your neck of the woods, man. I'm heading out on Thursday to the show. So we'll be out there, and but I'm going Cody. It'd be quite the I mean, not that there's anything wrong with going with Roman. Certainly not. But I think it's Cody's time.
Yeah, you know what? It would so just to do a little, analyzing here on my end. I'm not an analyst. I'm not an analyst.
There you go.
I'm neither of those. I can barely speak, but it would be a huge waste of investment in Cody if they don't pay it off at WrestleMania.
Yeah. Timing is everything in wrestling, man. I mean,
Yeah.
that's a big part of it. And, striking at the right time it's infinitely important. Like, you got to pull the trigger at the opportune moment. And I think if you wait here, man, you really hurt. Like, you really hurt him. And
Yeah.
so, there's still a story to be told for Roman. He's not going anywhere. But I think Cody needs that belt to continue his journey. And hey, he's been good for business too. It's not like you're having this just major drop off. Yeah, it's risky because you never know what happens when you got somebody new at the top of your company. But Roman's not. He's still around. He's not leaving. So I think they'll be in good hands. And you're right. Like, it's you don't want to just completely cut Cody's legs off with a loss here. So. It's going to make for quite a weekend.
Just hope he doesn't hurt himself going into this.
I know, dude. Okay, I was having the same thought. It wasn't this bad. The match yesterday against Solo Sikoa, it was Fridays, which, like, he's going like 20 minutes, to open SmackDown. And I'm like, dude, you got the WrestleMania main event in the 8 days at that point. Like, oh man. But I guess that's part of the business, man. You gotta sell the matches.
Yeah, he also he's admitted on I think it was what's his name, Ryan Stanton's podcast, where he just wrestles hard because he wants to, and it's kind
speed, yeah.
And I'm like, dude, it's reckless when you're this close to WrestleMania and this close to, it's kind of like CM Punk. CM Punk came in and won the title and then hurt himself doing something stupid 3 days later, and then he was gone for 6 months. But we won't talk about that.
We need like another hour and a half, man.
Yeah. I do have one last wrestling question because you sparked another comment, thought in my head. So, fantasy booking. Cody beats Rhodes, or Cody beats Reigns. Does Reigns go away for 6 months?
Yeah, I think, or for 6 months, like 6 months,
or at some point goes away for an extended period.
I think he does. I think I think he goes away for a bit. And I think you do a rematch at some point, maybe even at SummerSlam. But I think he goes away a little bit. But I don't, I think there's a story that you want to tell, though, not too long, with him and the bloodline. Like Cody a couple weeks ago on Raw, like, outlined this world of, this is what it's going to be like, Roman, when you don't have the belt and you don't have the championship. I think you want to tell that story with Roman on TV. Like, dig into that, like, dive right into the psychology of that between him and Jay and Jimmy and Paul Heyman, show that, because I think it's pretty compelling. But I think you do give it some time to breathe. I think you let Cody kind of be the champion on his own and, like, have it be his show, his company. And then when the time's right, you bring Roman back and you tell that story. But 6 months, I mean, I guess that's pretty much for SummerSlam, but I think I'd probably bring him back before then because you don't want people to forget, like, where the story was either.
Yeah.
So, but time off, yes. 6 months, probably less than that.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see what happens.
Yeah.
All right. Stunning, the artistry. Oh, dang, I just messed up. I messed that up, man. I was a pro for a second.
You're good.
Stunning, the wrestling artistry of Steve Austin. Pre-orders right now. Link in the description. Zack Heydorn over at the PWTorch. Tell everybody where they can find you on social media.
You guys can find me on social media at Heydorn. So that's Heydorn Torch.
Great. Zack, stick around for just a second. We'll be back with more in just a few.